Hello, and welcome to the Blizzard Watch podcast. I'm your host, Joe Perez, filling in for Matt today, who right now is probably cursing his internet provider from the fashion of James T. Kirk taking to his knees and yelling about Khan. But I'm not by myself today. Joining me in my intrepid journey to fill that gap is Liz Harper, our editor-in-chief. How you doing tonight, Liz?
Howdy.
And then joining us as a third seat, we love him. You know him. You might love him. I don't know your opinion of him, but I think he's a pretty great guy. Phil, how you doing today, Phil?
I'm good. I appreciate you hedging your bets. They may not even love me on purpose. I have been mistaken for the other Phil before and been thanked for some of his articles.
That is very, very funny and very, very true. I still remember when I first started for the site way long ago, getting mistaken for a lot of people, and then being told that was the worst thing that ever happened to shaman writing. You know,
well,
the usual.
It was back in the days of WoW Insider. It was kind of a rite of passage where you were not a real writer until someone emailed us to complain that you were the worst thing about WoW Insider. So yeah, that just means you fit in.
Yeah, I remember my real rite of passage was the first BlizzCon that I worked for the WoW Insider site, and somebody figured out who I was and threw a drink in my face, and and then went and bought me a drink and handed it to me and said, "I hate what you say about Shaman, but I respect your opinion." And we wound up becoming really good friends after that. Like, it was just a random thing that happened. Life is weird. But we're not here to talk about the old site or things like that. Instead, we're here to talk about what's going on this week, because there's a lot. It's the first week of 2025, y'all. Well, we got our new release for release content for WoW, because one, the anniversary event has finally ended. As of this recording, it was the day prior. So we're recording on the 7th. It ended today with the reset, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, it ended this morning.
Yeah. And apparently there was a lot of uncertainty what would happen to any of your unused bronze celebration tokens. We got some good news, though, at least. They're not just going to go to waste like we originally thought. They're going to be converted into time-warped badges at a rate of 20-1 in patch 11.1, which is really, really neat. Some additional good... Go ahead.
It's interesting because Blizzard was encouraging everyone to okay, spend these before the event ends. Spend them before the event ends. Go and buy time-warped badges. Do it before the event ends. And we were doing the same thing. Go buy time-warped badges. Go buy your stuff. And then just after it ends, Blizzard says, okay, actually, if you have any bronze celebration tokens left, we'll convert them in the next patch.
Which, I mean, again, good. Right? Like it's a process. I think they also probably realized that people were gone for the holidays and maybe not even back yet, or don't have access to their accounts. And so maybe doing something to help them out is not the end of the world, which I think also partially informed their decisions to do another thing, which is the Secrets event is still available to complete. And you can still earn the detective title, an incognito, however you want to say that. The indecipherable fell cycle, as long as you go and find Alex and Dornegal, instead of the fairgrounds, which I think is really nice, because I think a lot of people were worried about that as well. It's like, hey, I'm traveling for the holidays. I'm not going to have time to finish this. Or in my case, I worked too dang much. So I can actually sit down and finish this. So, good stuff all around.
I'll say that we did know that was going to stick around because Secrets is designed to be evergreen content. We just didn't know how exactly. And I don't think we'd actually had any confirmation from Blizzard exactly how until they moved Alex to Dornegal. I really hope they do something with her to make her title even longer in the future.
Yes. And not just to be outdone with that, or I shouldn't say that. That's not the only update. There's several more things. You can finally return to Khadgar. If you noticed, for the last several weeks, there was a timer that said return to Khadgar in X time. Well, you can go do that now. And there's another essentially chapter quest in our campaign, which is the Fate of the Kirin Tor story quest. I have not had a chance to finish them. I'm partially through. I just got to the part where I need to go to the land of the void bugs and deal with them. But I think it's really interesting that we're actually getting resolution, or at least some resolution or progression, while the expansion is still current. Like, I'm not used to this, Blizzard. Like, I'm not used to you giving me like some form of payoff like immediately. Have you either of you gone through and done it? Oh yeah, no.
I kind of expected that the thing with the Kirin Tor being displaced would be something that we deal with across the expansion. Like, think like the rebuilding tier quest line, where they went through pretty much all of Dragonflight. But it appears that they want to kind of leave the Kirin Tor maybe in a better state than the expansion found them right off the bat, and I'm not upset about that.
Of course, the other thing about that suggests that we have maybe some bigger stories to tell. So we have more going on that we're going to need to focus on in future patches. And maybe we just don't have time or interest in spending the entire expansion figuring out what the deal is with the Kirin Tor.
Well, and I mean, the Kirin Tor is sort of important for what's going on. And also, we talked about this on Lore Watch, at least. The Kirin Tor, Dalaran was as much a dangerous object as it was a floating city / base of operations. It held a lot of artifacts and a lot of very dangerous prisoners who are now free. So we're starting to see some of the fallout from that. So not everything is going to be nice and tidy. And while the Kirin Tor may be left in a better place than they were before this, the fallout from Dalaran exploding will probably be long felt for a while, or at least that's the impression that I get. All right. I believe there is also the Turbulent Timeways event is going to be kicking off today as well. Either of you want to talk about that?
You can talk about it. Yeah, I've actually already been doing it. So if people missed this back in Dragonflight, which is the first time they did it, basically we are going to have, it was 6, it's now 7. Thank you, Liz, for catching me out on that. Weeks in a row of time walking. And for each dungeon you complete, you'll get a stacking buff that increases your amount of XP earned, all the way up to a whopping 30% after you do 4 dungeons. And then if you do this for 5 out of the 7 weeks, you get that Master of Timeways 30% buff. You will be awarded a brand new mount, the Timely Buzzbee, which appears to be a giant bee with a bronze dragon hourglass on its back.
That seems fun.
Perfect. It is perfect, and I need it.
It's also,
which probably means I need to go play more WoW instead of staring at my Steam wishlist.
Which is fair, and we despite what we talked about on the pre-show, at least the time walking dungeons tend to be relatively quick. I believe.
Oh yeah,
it's what Legion right now. I think is the current one.
It is Mists of Pandaria.
Mists of Pandaria. They run relatively quickly, and it's a good way to level alts, like a really good way to level alts. So if you're been kind of sitting and waiting and looking for leveling them, basically for any sort of like bonus or benefit. Because not only do you get that, it also goes on top of your warband buff as well, and it's just a ton of XP. It just vomits XP at you at this point.
Maybe I'll finally get around to leveling the mage that I was like sure I was going to level immediately and thought I might even play as a main this expansion.
Yeah, I think
pretty sure she's level 71.
I'm pretty sure this is going to cause me to go through and just level all of my characters that are sitting at 70 because it'll just be so quick.
Good idea. Yeah, and then you got them.
There is both the 5 warband mentors thing that I haven't gotten yet, but there is also someone pointed out to me a feat of strength for getting one of every class to max level. And if there's anything I love, it's completely meaningless achievements.
Listen, I like my fake nerd points. I need them as well, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to use this to get those. I did a little time walking today on my lunch break. Actually, ran 2 dungeons on a level 10 rogue who is now level 19.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think who was it that was in Raid Talk? I think it was a doe. Might have been a doe. Might have been 6. We're talking about during the anniversary event, 2 time walking dungeons, and answering 1 question was a level. If you're above 70, the trivia question. So the XP is about the same, but if you get the stacking buff, you're going to be blowing through levels like crazy. So no reason not to give it a shot if you're interested in it.
It's even stacked with Darkmoon Fair right now, so it can go really fast this week if you want to.
Zoomies.
Many, many zooms. Not to be outdone with the Turbulent Timeways, we do see patch 11.1 PTR is now live, with raid and dungeon testing starting this week. There's a couple new pieces here. Liz, do you want to talk about that with the new graphic and the new warband stuff?
Yes. We're just starting getting data mining from the PTR. People are just starting to log on as we're recording this. But one of the things that really called out to me, and actually I think I saw Phil mention it before I saw it, is there's a new swirlies graphic. I don't know if this comes across very well without sharing an image with you, but all of those swirly things on the ground that you are not supposed to stand in, that sometimes have very vague edges that catch you when you are really sure you were not standing in it. Now they're much crisper looking circles, which I think is great as long as those circles are actually in the accurate place, which there have been some problems with that during the War Within so far. So we'll see. I think it's good to just make these things clear. Clarity is good. We are also getting some new campsite options for our warband, which is a super pointless cosmetic thing that I am so excited for. This is so pointless, and yet I am so here for it. So you, of course, have your traditional campsite, but you'll have other ones. Wowhead is reporting you will also have Cultists Quay, the Arathi airship delve in Hallowfall, the Galagio Grand Gallery, the site of the new Undermine raid. Do any of us really want to hang out in the Galagio? I don't know. Freywold Spring, the Earthen Village south of Dordogal, and another campfire location that WoW had said is seemingly set on the Isle of Dorn, Honoran Plains, Belemeth, or other similarly lush green zone. And I think it kind of looks like Honoran. It's lush and green. That's what you got.
Yeah, it definitely looks that. The one thing that I was looking at this and I saw was the Freywold Spring. If your characters aren't lounging in that hot spring, I'm going to be very upset.
Please let that be the case. I didn't even think about that.
I have to say, though, that some of our characters, some of the things in the warband screen are a little weird, like dual wielding characters. I have a dual wielding for Volpera Fury Warrior who's on my warband screen, and she holds her weapons while she's sitting. She holds her weapons in front of her, crossed over, and I'm like, you're just gonna stab yourself over there. That's dangerous. And so I hope maybe we get a few more cosmetic improvements. Also, I still have that weird thing where my warband screen cuts off the character on the far right. They just don't fit on the screen. I really have to mess with my graphic settings and shrink things down for them to all fit on the screen, which I have never been able to figure out. So, but I am super hyped about this. We are no doubt going to hear much, much more about patch 11.1 in the future as we get more PTR testing in. We are guessing that the patch will go live in early February, and we'll see. We'll see what happens.
One thing I did want to go back on real quick, because I was looking at this while you were talking, and I thought was really interesting. Go back to the swirls thing. I'm sure not everybody is going to care about it, but I definitely do, which is one of the biggest complaints I've ever had about ground effects in WoW is, and I'm sure every single person has suffered from it, the ground effect being larger than the visual makes you think it is. So looking at how they're doing it is the graphic will still exist for a ground effect, but that defined edge that is going to be really, really bright, and it's going to be exactly, you need to be outside of that bright ring, and that's where your safety is. And I think that's...
Yes, I love this.
I love this. I know two of our raiders that will continue to die to it, and I'm going to make fun of him when I talk with him next time. But I think it's a vast improvement from where we were, which is that nebulous, and especially when you're dealing with purple on purple or red on red, which happens all of the time in all of these raids. It's hard to know where to stand and where you're safe. And I really like that. I like that it feels like an accessibility change, right? Almost. And I'm all for that because it makes the game more viable for more people. So super happy with that.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this. Unfortunately, there will not be as many times where I can claim, oh, I was definitely standing outside that because, I'll know. The
Well,
circle has a very defined edge.
what is the mechanic on the spider duo? I forget what its official name is. The rings?
Oh, the
The
spikes,
impaling rings.
yeah.
Yes. So second to last boss. Wow, I'm forgetting everything's
Council.
name tonight. The council fight in Narubar Palace. There are these series of rings, and they do have a pretty defined edge. But for a while, the graphic and the actual effect were not in the same place. There was a graphical mismatch that could throw you off. So sometimes even these defined edges aren't as helpful as you think they'll be. But I hope this is, part of a kind of rethinking of the visuals here, and we will definitely have these things in their little crisply defined spaces.
Yes, I'm all for it. There are also some upcoming changes to the War Within Season 2 dungeons. Who wants to talk about that?
We brought the guy who wrote the article, so I'm pointing at Phil.
Yeah, that sounds like me. Yeah, so Season 2, we get to our brand new dungeon pool for Mythic Plus is changing. It's continued to be a mix of old and new, which is cool. And they've kind of, as many dungeons as they could this time around, seem to be goblin themed. So, we've got the Motherlode, we've got the Cinderbrew Meadery, et cetera, et cetera. But with these, always when they scale these up to Mythic Plus, they always have to tweak them in some ways. For the current patch's dungeons, it's because we haven't actually seen things like Cinderbrew Meadery or the Rookery in Mythic Plus yet. And then for some of them, it's just they've desperately needed a rebalance for years. Looking at you, the Theater of Pain. We'll see how this plays out over the next 6 weeks, because that is how long the testing schedule for the dungeons is set to go. But we had data mine changes come out from Wowhead, and there were a number of changes that were... Some dungeons were just numeric, like Cinderbrew Meadery mostly seem to be just numeric stuff, but then we've got ones like there's a change to a large set of changes to the first bosses in Mechagon Workshop, which is also in the spool, that basically make that an entirely new boss fight. It's going to be interesting, yeah, because if people remember that dungeon at all, previously your tank would take the humanoid one who had the metal armor around to the hammers around that side of the room and smash its armor off because you couldn't damage it, while everyone else worried about the tank that charged around. No Mercy. And now No Mercy charges a little faster, but it's not as deadly to just have alive. It's not pulsing AoE damage everywhere in the room. The Pummeler doesn't start with its maximum armor. It's like an ultimate ability, but more importantly, if you kill one of them first, they start pulsing lightning damage. So groups are going to have to completely change how they handle that fight, because you now have to effectively deal with both bosses at the same time. So it's going to be an interesting, some of these interesting tweaks. I'm going to call the only dungeon out that I didn't see a lot of changes that I felt need them, though. Dark Flame Cleft has about the most miserable last 1/3 of a dungeon that I can think of. Starting with the part where you escort a candle through a candle on a minecart through the dark, and have to wander out into the darkness where you cannot be healed to retrieve candles and bring them back to the cart. The only data mine change to that part was a change to a dummy effect, which is effectively something that runs on the servers, and data mining can't tell you what that change actually was, just the input number. That seems like it's still there, and it got some kind of numeric change. I'm really hoping we see some kind of change to that. And then the fight against the darkness, the final boss, where you are not only trying to fight the boss, keep yourselves alive, and everything else, you're also protecting a candle, because if it knocks that candle out, there is not really a way to relight it to full strength, and you will get feared about every 10 seconds. Again, no changes data mined for the darkness fight. So I'm really hoping that dungeon testing shows us some changes to those that just couldn't be picked up. Because as WoW had pointed out, if there were changes that added new abilities to enemies, data mining wouldn't pick it up for various reasons. So I'm just really hoping the Dark Flame Cleft got the changes we all hope it will, because the others seem at least interesting in making making things that were too deadly safer, or making bosses that were kind of boring, a little more interesting, but like Dark Flame Cleft needs a lot of work before season 2 starts. So it'll get tested twice over the for 2 separate weeks over the next 6 weeks. So here's hoping.
Okay. Yeah, I hope that they take a look. Dark Flame Cleft is one of the ones that I was dreading. Not that there aren't current problematic ones that people really, really dislike running right now. But I can see that just being awful in pugs or pickup groups just later on. Hopefully they look at it and do some tweaking. I was looking at some of the changes to Theater of Pain. Glad to see a lot of those adjustments. They seem like they're minor, but it's definitely huge quality of life to make those dungeons a lot more viable and a lot less deadly. Or at least I shouldn't say less deadly, a lot more manageable, right? So I'm enjoying that. And hopefully, like you said, hopefully testing will do something for Dark Flame Cleft, because otherwise you're going to see two things happen. You're going to see hard composition requirements for people with immunities for part of the mine cart thing. And you're going to see, for the last boss, people trying to figure out how to cheese through the candle effect to either A, keep it alive longer, or B, kill the boss before they have to worry about it, which is just unfun, I think.
Yeah, and at higher keys, that also just becomes untenable. So.
Yeah, 10 and above, I can see that just being a nightmare. But hey, that's what testing's there for. So if you are interested in this, the upcoming season, get on the PTR, do the testing for the dungeons, and submit your feedback. It does appear that they have been listening to it, so now is your time to shine, if you are so inclined. I think that's it for WoW news. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about or that we missed?
Not that I can think of. We're kind of in that pre-patch lull now. We got our 7 weeks of Turbulent Timeways, and if Dragonflight is anything to go by, the patch usually comes shortly after. So,
Fair enough. I think we're going to move on to some Diablo news, though, because I think that's there are people that still play Diablo, right? Like, yeah, I mean, at least a couple of you do, maybe.
Diablo was actually my most played game last year in my PlayStation end of year wrap up, which is something I kind of find that to be a bummer, because I do enjoy it, but at the same time, should this be the thing I've spent most of my time playing in the last year on my PlayStation? I don't know.
That's fair. So who wants to talk about Diablo 3 Season 33? Because that seems to have been a little bit of a kerfuffle.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We are predicting Season 33 will end sometime in February. And but it actually ended this weekend with no notice at all. Players who were online just got a notice that the seasonal realms are shutting down in a half hour. That was all the notice anyone got. And usually the Diablo 3 team is pretty good about giving 2 weeks notice, sometimes running a PTR. But yeah, the seasons across all regions shut down. Pez Radar, Adam, posted on the forums that this was actually a mistake. It was a miscommunication. They accidentally shut down Season 33. And in Diablo, that's kind of a problem, because when a season ends, there's this automatic kind of cycle to transfer your seasonal characters onto the normal realms, and to mail all of the gear that your seasonal characters have to your main characters and put it in your main stash on the non-seasonal realm. So that already happened. Everyone, their seasonal characters had moved, all of their gear was in their stash on the non-seasonal realms, and Blizzard is kind of like, oopsie. I have a big feeling that there probably wasn't like an undo button for this. This was not an error they anticipated having. So they have re-enabled Season 33, but it's been a little bumpy. A lot of players are reporting that end-game progress has been reset, that their Paragon points have been reset. So it's a little frustrating. I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that this happened in the first place just because of a miscommunication. They accidentally ended an entire season. I know Diablo 3 is now our last generation Diablo game, but there's still a lot of people who play it. So this one surprised me. It looks like Blizzard has done what they could to fix it, but it's been a little rocky. And Season 33, in case you're interested in a little Diablo 3, is probably running for maybe 3 or 4 more weeks. So you have time to play it if you still want to.
Fair enough. The next item on our list is apparently that the original Diablo is going to be available on Game Pass. What? That's cool. Who wants to talk about that?
I don't know anything about it, but I do know that's cool. I had to check it first to see if this was a typo. I was like, did they mean Diablo 4? Nope, it's the original. It's the Ultimate Edition of Diablo for consoles.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually really cool because if you have not played the original Diablo, it's a really great opportunity for you to maybe give it a shot, especially if you're a Game Pass user. It looks like they're going to wind up doing another... they basically refresh the lineup every month or so.
Every month or so, yeah.
Sometimes multiple times where like 5 or 6 games will leave, 5 or 6 games will come on. We were kind of curious what from Blizzard's archives would make its way onto Game Pass. So seeing Diablo make it there is pretty cool. I'm curious if we'll see some of the other stuff. In particular, because Blizzard, they released the retro, like, Blizzard arcade type stuff not too long ago, or maybe longer than I remember. And I'm wondering if we'll start seeing some of that wind up in the Game Pass in the near future so that people can experience some of the classics that were in console form before, but on modern day consoles like Lost Vikings or heck, maybe Blackthorn, which is a game like almost no one I remember played besides like me and like 3 of my friends. But I think that's interesting. I think that's really cool. And just added value to Game Pass.
I'm gonna point out here the arcade collection came out 4 years ago, and also yes, I would personally love to see StarCraft 2 come out on this thing. Give me StarCraft 2 on Game Pass, I'll play it.
Yeah, so I guess we can branch off into some speculation a little bit on that. So we know that like Phil Spector and really really loves StarCraft. And there's been speculation that there might potentially be a future resurgence of StarCraft somewhere, or at least hopium that there will be. I think that you would start seeing all the content for StarCraft become available on Game Pass, probably to gauge interest and see if there's metrics or numbers. Because I think that's one thing that they can do that maybe they weren't able to do before. Because StarCraft numbers themselves through like battle.net or anything like that. I don't know what the data collection rate was for there, but it was, I don't want to say a smaller audience because Blizzard has a huge audience, but Game Pass is inevitably larger and it reaches more people. And so if they were to make like StarCraft available on Game Pass and then see how many people download it, that could be a usage case.
I do need to interrupt you because they actually did. They did in November. I had to go check to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. StarCraft Remastered and the complete campaign to StarCraft 2 were added to Game Pass PC Edition in November. So, if you want to play that, you want a refresher, you want to check it out for the first time because you've never played StarCraft because Blizzard kind of abandoned it, it's there. It's there on PC Game Pass.
And if PC Game Pass isn't your thing, going back to Diablo, apparently you can also buy it on GOG for $10 when it comes with the Hellfire expansion. Because, well, what is Diablo 1 without the Hellfire expansion? A miserable pile of secrets. And then apparently it is the Darkening of Tristram time in Diablo 3. So what's going on with this? It's another anniversary, right?
I mean, we celebrate this. We were just talking about how you can play the original Diablo on Game Pass right now. But Darkening of Tristram is basically the original Diablo, only in Diablo 3. So it's an anniversary event, comes around every January, and you get to go into like the classic Tristram Cathedral and play some of that early Diablo 1 content. And it's cool. It's also, we've seen this for several years now, so it's starting to get a little samey. It hasn't been updated. It also, when you go into the cathedral, it changes your graphics setting to retrovision, so you get the authentic Diablo 1 experience. So it's a fun way to revisit it without actually having to go all the way back and play Diablo 1. But, right now you could actually also go back and play Diablo 1. It's a great game. I don't know that the gameplay feels a little
slow.
aged. Yeah. But I still think Diablo 1 has a really striking story, and that one stuck with me. The end of that game has stuck with me for many years now.
We just wound up doing a whole tinfoil hat / what if episode based off of one of our listeners' questions based off of the story of Diablo 1. So shameless self-promotion, go check out that lore watch. But yeah, that story definitely stuck with you, especially when you get to the end, and then seeing how Diablo 2 kicks off, and you realize how much the ending of Diablo 1 defined the rest of what was to come. Like, it is wild. But yeah, there's your Diablo news for this week. There is a little bit of Overwatch news, which I will talk about because I think I'm the only one that even still remotely plays it. The availability of the 6v6 World Queue has been extended through January 21st. And some people are asking, well, why does it have to go away at all? The answer is because they're experimenting with other 6v6 queues, which will be kicking off on January 21st for the next batch of them, which are going to be, which I think is interesting. But not only that, hero balance changes for standard formats will not apply to the 6v6 format, including a standard hero balance that is releasing today, which I haven't gone through the notes yet. But I find that interesting that they're not applying hero balances to the 6v6 format because they're still balancing the heroes for 5v5 play, which that's really, really interesting. And I guess
that could be, you could wind up with some really awkward gameplay here if they're trying to do both at the same time. I mean,
yeah.
And does this mean they're going to maintain two divergent sets of heroes?
Maybe. And I don't, well, actually, let me think about that for a second. Probably not. I think if anything, they're probably going to wind up making a hard decision soon. And I think either 6v6 will remain its own like arcade thing that will never be balanced and will be left as the Wild West of Overwatch, where they'll eventually do the, words are failing me today. I have not had nearly enough caffeine. I apologize. Where they'll do like the balances flow through and whatever happens. Or they might be testing the waters still to see if 6v6 comes back as the standard format. This is where I'm going to talk about my recent favorite game for this type of hero shooter because I think it's relevant. But I think that they're looking at what's happening with Marvel Rivals and realizing how much they lost by going from 6v6 to 5v5. Because I know a ton of players that stopped playing at that point. 6v6 was their preferred way to play. It was a lot of fun. And if you had a group of 6 friends that played constantly, going to 5v5 meant somebody was sitting in the wings waiting. And it made it far less of a social game. And I've talked about this before. There's social gaming is a thing that still exists where people will play a game not because they want to play the game, but because they want to play with their friends. And Overwatch with a 6-player queue, it was very easy to get a group of people together to just relax, talk on Discord or TeamSpeak or whatever, kick back and like just do goofy banana stuff and not take it too seriously. And when you take that away, most groups aren't going to want to exclude somebody. They're going to go find another game to play. And that's just how it is, right? Like it's a natural thing. So I think they might be testing the waters to see if this becomes a permanent thing. What do you guys think?
You would think Blizzard would remember about reducing group sizes after the number of times they've done that in the history of their various games. But as we've surmised, I don't think their various departments ever talk to each other. So.
Fair enough.
It's on a more serious. It is interesting. On a more serious side, I know a lot of people from different venues who have who were Overwatch 1 players who were not enthused about Overwatch 2 and who are absolutely wild about Marvel Rivals. I know another streamer in particular who made it his mission to get into that Grandmaster rank as soon as he could and did it and was still playing the game, just nuts for Rivals, in a way that I haven't heard him talk about Overwatch in years. And yeah, it's like you said, it would not surprise me if they are really looking at Rivals kind of eating their lunch right now and going, how do we get that back? How do we become if not the premier, teen hero shooter anymore, how do we at least become, not the joke, not Overwatch used to be good.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, and I don't want to beleaguer the point, so I'll make it quick. Overwatch was lightning in a bottle when it dropped, in much the same way that WoW was. It was doing things that other hero shooters weren't doing at the time. It was easily accessible. They were very smart in their marketing for it, making it free for people that had a year subscription or 6-month subscription for WoW, and basically trying to get people to play it. And you had a bunch of passionate devs behind it. And then life happens. Things changed. The dev core changed. People that were passionate about the project left. Esports isn't as much of a focus anymore, if at all. Which Overwatch was positioned to be like this big king of esports. And they sort of lost sight of what was fun. And then you have Marvel Rivals, which is doing all the same things Overwatch did when it first released. Hero shooter, fresh aspects on it, and a passionate dev base. That we were talking about this in the pre-show. Go back and watch the dev diaries for the Marvel Rivals group. They're just thankful. Like, they're just happy and thankful that people are playing and enjoying their game. And like, you don't hear that anymore. So from Overwatch, right? Like, you don't hear people that are just, oh, we're really excited about the game we're making. Not nearly as much as we used to. Not when Kaplan was sitting in front of a fire talking about how awesome all the heroes were, or, being really excited that the Junker Queen was going to be around, or you don't hear that anymore. And it just felt like we talk about maintenance mode. It almost kind of feels like Overwatch is falling into that category. And like you said, they're trying to figure maybe their way out of that hole. And I hope they do, because Overwatch at its core is a good game. It just needs love. And without that passion, you don't have a good game. But I think that's going to do it for Overwatch. The other thing that's happening this week, which I think is super fun and started earlier this week, Sunday, I believe, is that Awesome Games Done Quick is happening. And it is running through January 11th this weekend to raise money for the Prevent Cancer Foundation, a very important foundation that is near and dear to my heart at the very least. There's a lot of really fun games that have already been run and that are being run. Have either of you been paying attention to it?
I have not had time, but I am looking forward to catching up on YouTube. I mean, all of this is being live streamed. You can turn on the GDQ stream anytime and just find games and games and games and games, and they're all going to be fun. But shortly after, usually the next day, they'll be on YouTube. So even if you miss it, you can still tune in and enjoy these crazy speedruns they're doing.
They've been doing it quicker than next day. Like, they've been within hours of the run completing. They've been up on YouTube. Yeah. So shout out to the AGDQ crew who's been doing that. That's absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely.
And I know Mitch is going to be there in person this year, and I am extremely jealous. He's going to be there over the weekend.
That's pretty amazing. I've always wanted to go to one of those. And just participate in the audience, just because it's just a thing that's on my bucket list.
Oh, yeah.
But also I want to be there for games like Squirrel with a Gun. Because games like Squirrel with a Gun they're just goofy. They don't make any sense. It's absolutely bonkers. And seeing that in a group of people all laughing and having a good time would be absolutely phenomenal. Like, really great time. And I can see Mitch being there for the awful block, which would make a lot of sense.
Oh, absolutely.
He did. He did recommend everyone watch the Awful Block. So yes. There you go.
You have to. The winter's Awful Block and the summer's Silly Block. I destroy my sleep schedule at least once to watch as much of them as I can.
Absolutely.
And they were actually nice enough this year. The shout out to the GDQ web team. The schedule actually specifically calls out which games are now part of the Awful Block, rather than having to look at them and go, "Well, that sounds bad." They now have a special highlighting for people who are really looking for the Awful Block games to find them on the schedule. GDQ is a big event in our house. My wife and I, we have both donated in the past because, like Joe said, the Prevent Cancer Foundation is very important to us. Whenever it's GDQ, it is on our TV 24/7. Like my PS5 gets no game work that week because it's running the Twitch app to show us GDQ all week long. I especially want to shout out one that I watched last night that was just phenomenal. A 33-minute estimate run of Breath of the Wild. 2 players, 1 controller.
Yes.
It is so wild, especially when they start explaining some of the tricks. Like these things are hard enough to pull off on your own when you're running, both halves of the controller. But now you've got these guys passing control off up to 12 times per second to pull off some of these tricks, like between the different halves of the controller. It's a phenomenal one. There's also one coming up later this week on Friday that I want to call out, which is Crazy Taxi with a live backing band. It's either Friday or Saturday.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, one of three musical themed games in the speedrun. There's also somebody who will be playing New Super Mario Brothers for the Wii, playing piano and using head motions to control the game.
That's not my favorite one. My absolute favorite one is, and I've watched him do this.
Sax?
It's Dr. Doot. Dr. Doot playing Elden Ring on an electronic saxophone. It is absolutely insane. I have watched his streams. It is. I can barely play Elden Ring on a controller, and he's playing it on an electronic saxophone and making me look like a chump, and I am here for it. Like, I love stuff like that. I'm so here for it. Are there other ones that you are interested or that you are excited that are going to be played in the block? I have some that I definitely want to call out. But Liz, are there any that you are really, really want to catch up on or see?
There's nothing in particular. I'm just gonna turn on Twitch probably after we're done here.
I support this. Phil?
I mean, yeah, I'm kind of like Liz. I'll kind of grab whatever. I am looking forward to some of the ones from at the beginning of the awful block. Superman 64 is back. That game is notoriously trash.
Yep.
And there is one shortly after midnight on Thursday. There is a game called Golf with Your Grandmother, and I need to see what that is about.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's going to be an absolute riot of a time. I can already tell. One that I'm actually really interested in is Windblown. It's the next game from Motion Twin. It just released in early access, I believe. Motion Twin being the folks behind Dead Cells. And it's a arena roguelike, very similar to Hades 2, that type of game. And I'm really curious because there are already speedruns for it for 3-player all encounters. I want to see what this game looks like because I've only seen people play it single player. I'd want to see what the multiplayer looks like, so I'm super here for it. The other one, which is a personal favorite game of mine as far as first-person shooters go, is Bullets Per Minute, which is a rhythm shooter. I love rhythm games, and it's definitely one that I'm looking forward to seeing people run. It's going to happen at 1 a.m. on Friday. I'm not sleeping on Friday, apparently, because immediately after that is Castlevania Dracula X, which I have to watch. And there's just so many really, really good games. I'm excited for this particular GDQ. Like Phil said, it's one of those things that just, it's constantly on my monitors or my TV or wherever I'm at. It's on my second monitor at work while I'm working between meetings. Sometimes during meetings, don't tell my boss. But I really do like all the cool stuff. And Crazy Taxi with the live band, I'm so here for this. I need this so bad. And I cannot wait to hear it. Although it does look like it is a 4-piece. So you've got a vocals, guitar, a drums, and bass, and that's it, which is great. That's perfectly fine. I cannot wait to see what happens with that.
I do want to call out one more because I forgot about it, but somebody I was looking back to see because we talked about ones we were looking forward to in Blizzard Watch Discord, and I'd forgotten about this. Extremely indie PS1 game, No One Can Stop Mr. Domino It's certainly one of the most games of all time, and I'm looking forward to seeing a speed run of it. It's exactly what it sounds like. You're an anthropomorphic domino in a house that has been set up to be a domino course. It is it has kind of the spirit of Katamari Damacy years before that game ever came out, and I remember it fondly because it was on one of the first PS1 demo discs I ever had, and I am really way back when. I think it came with a magazine, so really looking forward to that one. That one is in the early hours, so probably catch it on YouTube, like Liz talked about, because they are really getting these up ASAP. So
heck yeah, All right. I think that's going to do it for game news. I think there's a little site news in which I'm going to throw it over to Liz, though. So, Liz, if you don't mind.
Yes, I want to thank some new supporters we have gotten in the past week. Thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. It really helps keep the site running and growing. Benjamin this week supported us at $7.50 Canadian, which I think may be our $5 tier. Ronald sent in a $5 contribution. Aaron at $5, and I'm not sure how this one's pronounced. I don't know if the Enrique or it has an H in front of it. Henrique? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I am very grateful that you are supporting us. And at $5, you get early access to these podcasts, and you get an ads-free site experience, so you can read Blizzard Watch without the advertisements. We also got Michael upgraded his pledge to $50. That helps us out so much for those of you who are up at this tier. And while I'm at it, a shout out to the other people who support us at the $50 level. David, Brent, Tyler, Josh, Nicholas, Guy, Seth, Jacques, I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Dr. Dia, Michael, that is a different Michael, and Patches, Wayne, Eric, and Jeff. You are all here keeping us going, and I appreciate you so much. I also want to remind you, if you like tabletop gaming, please subscribe to our new Tavern Watch podcast feed. We used to post those on the main podcast feed, but now they have their own feed, so if you don't care about them, you don't have to listen to them. But if you do care about them, you need to go subscribe. So don't forget to do that. This week, we will have our new episode of Sentai and Sensibility. That'll be our 3rd episode is coming out, so you can enjoy that.
Do it. Listen to my funky intro. Go for it.
It was so fun to run. So that's going on. Subscribe if you want to listen. It should be on all of your favorite podcast channels, or if you support us at $3 up, you can get it on Patreon ads free. We are also hard at work getting a new version of the Blizzard Watch site up this year, which that is your support, is letting us do things like that, letting us do more podcasts. We are still a little lower on Patreon than I would like to be. We're just under $4,000, which we try to keep it around $4,000. But particularly ads on the podcast have really been help keep the site even on an even keel here. And all of this is thanks to you out there, our listeners, our readers. We appreciate you. If you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch at any level, that really helps. It's a large community contributing a little that allows this site and all of these podcasts to exist. If you can only listen or read, that also helps. And we love your moral support too. So thank you for supporting us. And I'm going to toss it back to Joe.
Indeed. Thank you all for your continued support. And again, reminders, you can ask us questions. And if you are a supporter, we give you a special benefit where you can join us on our Discord server for the Patron Q and Podcast Questions channel. And we will always look there first for your questions. It's our little way of saying thank you. Also, you can send us information through or questions through Patreon, which will usually entail Dan sending it to us with a cat meme or some other meme that has tickled his fancy at that time. So if you want us to have your question sent to us with a meme, you can do it that way as well. If you can't support us on Patreon, there are a number of other ways to support us as well, which does include sharing our content, leaving comments on our YouTube videos, or likes for the content as well. All of that stuff does matter. And believe it or not, the algorithm does actually pay attention when you share our content through like Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere that podcasts are found. If you share that link with people, it does take a look at that, and that does actually make a huge difference for us and does help support us just as much as you giving us money. So we appreciate that. I think we have time for a question, and I think this is an important question, and it comes from our friend Tetsemi, who loves to send us questions, and we appreciate all the questions you send us, Tetsemi. And it's, what is your favorite moment from any game you played this year? And what is your favorite Blizzard Watch podcast discussion from this year? So I'm going to start with Phil. What is your favorite moment from any game you played this year?
Man, put me on the spot right away.
Hell yeah.
Man. So the game that absolutely sticks out of my head the most that I played was Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and I'm gonna have to give it to really just the moment in the ending that we all knew was coming. I don't want to give any more spoilers than that for people who might still be playing it, but like there is a spot, there's an event that happens in the end game that had been predicted all, you'd been calling it all along, but you didn't quite see the circumstances of it, and the dialogue options in that moment are just so mwah. Like, for everything else that, any other quibbles we may have at that game, that particular dialogue segment is like a reminder of BioWare at their finest, and I absolutely loved it. And also the one I picked was just a big old kick in the heart, so really enjoyed that. So,
Liz?
Man, you really stole my thunder there. I have to also say Veilguard, a slightly different moment that I also can't completely talk about because of spoilers, but it was something extremely bad happened. Something extremely bad happened that I did not see coming, and it was one of those moments where it breaks your heart. You've got something that you really cared about, and it has gone very wrong. And you might not think of something like that as, oh, this is my favorite video game moment of the year, but sometimes it's those stories that break your heart that stick with you. It is stories that have an emotional impact that you remember. I've played a lot of games this year. I have enjoyed a lot of games, but it is those shocks, those kicks that sometimes they just stick in your head forever. Like how I still remember the end of Diablo 1 when I first watched it, and your character shoves a soul stone through your skull. Those moments of surprise, shock, fear, horror, those can stick with you for a long time. So that moment, I hated it, but also it really made me feel something, and that's important in any kind of storytelling.
I would agree. I don't know if I have one singular moment that I really enjoyed from gaming. It is tough. I've been thinking about this while I kicked to you guys so I could have the time to go through the Rolodex, and I really am coming up with a blank. The only thing...
If you want some time to think, I can cover the one I had that wasn't Veilguard.
Go for it.
Oh.
So as I mentioned, I spent the last month of the year playing I Was a Teenage Exocolonist, which is a narrative-based game. It's got a little card game involved in it to determine whether you win or fail events, but for the most part, it's kind of like a extremely choice-heavy visual novel in the way it plays out. And as Liz will attest, the first time through that game, when you're playing it blind, it's incredibly sad. It's another one of those things that has emotional impacts where even things you thought you were doing good at the time can like come back. And like, I will say that it has motivated me. There is one particular character in that game. Shout out to whoever did the majority of the writing for Tangent. Most of my effort in continuing runs of that game has been trying to make a way to have Tangent have a happy ending. And I think I succeeded on the last playthrough that I did. But just like this one character and her whole arc stuck with me enough that I like that game resonated with me in a way that I really did not expect going into it. It was just like, oh, this is a funny little name. This is a $10 or $15 game. I'll give it a try. And like, it consumed me for the month of December. And so like, aside from Veilguard, I would say that the completion of the first loop of I Was a Teenage Exocolonist was my other favorite moment of the year.
Yeah.
There is...
Oh boy, that one.
Yeah, I think the instinct to claim whatchamacallit, Veilguard is really, really easy. It feels like for me a cheat. But I want to say, like, I think I'm gonna go with Marvel Rivals, like playing it for the first time. And so I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, it's just the flavor of the month thing. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. It really is that capture of that feeling of just fun and joy of when I first played Overwatch. And I remember playing Overwatch with my friends, and, we had a great time. It was, when we'd be done raiding, Phil would joke that I would log. I would go to log immediately after raid for a while, but that's because that's what I was doing. Is as soon as we were done with raiding, I was playing Overwatch with my friends, and sometimes this was people like Workshop and Raids, and sometimes this was my local gaming group. but it was always just a lot of fun and just kicking back and enjoyment. And this, when playing Marvel Rivals, it was the first time that I had felt something very similar to that in a while, and getting into groups with my local friends and playing with them, and us picking heroes based off the fact that they had synergies together, and like everybody being dead silent at the start of a match so we can listen to the interaction between the characters. Because when you're in the room, they talk to each other just like in Overwatch, but there's a lot more lines. And they got like actual voice actors, people who were voice actors for the animated shows, or did stuff for like the motion comics, or that you've seen or other video games, and brought them in to do the voiceover work for these characters in a hero shooter, something you normally don't see. And just everybody being dead silent, and then, oh, that was hilarious. Dude, that's so great. We got to try this next combination. And hearing everybody get so excited about it, and not caring that we got our butts blown off the stage immediately by a Jeff, the land shark, just throwing us off the stage, laughing the entire time and just having a good time. Like that for me is my one moment, at least from gaming, that really is going to stick with me. And as far as podcast discussions go, that one's also
That's
really
a hard one.
It's really tricky. We talk about a lot of stuff that I really enjoy. And I always enjoy discussing, not just with Matt and Liz, but also when we have guests on like Corey or Phil, or when we have other friends from the site joining us for like tabletop stuff or whatever the case is. But I think my favorite podcast moment was when I convinced Ben Brode to come on the podcast. I love Ben. If you're listening to this, I still love you, buddy. Ben is a chaos gremlin, and he is the most perfect chaos gremlin ever. And I watched your latest episode of Commander at Home, bud, when you were joining them as a guest. Truly inspired trolling. I adore you. But it was just fun. He wasn't just like some celebrity. He wasn't just a game dev. He was just hanging out, having a good time with us. And we were just talking about the most random of things. And those are the best interviews for me. Like I've interviewed a lot of people on podcasts over the years, and the ones that are always the most fun are the ones that immediately lose their structure, right? Where it just kind of goes wherever. Like I remember interviewing Ceci Jones years ago, and we were talking about Firewatch, because Firewatch was the big thing. And like immediately, I don't know how we started going on tangents, but we were like 10 minutes talking about Firewatch and how good she was as Delilah. And then an hour goes by and we're talking about like tabletop role-playing games and voice acting and, you know, all sorts of random stuff. And those are the most fun for me. So having Ben on and being able to talk with them about just random stuff was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. So that was probably my favorite moment this past year, which hard to believe it was this past year.
Oh gosh.
What about you, Liz? Do you have a favorite moment?
I will give two moments that I thought have been really fun over the past year. First, I enjoy every time we have Corey on and he brings up Heroes of the Storm, because Heroes of the Storm is ostensibly in maintenance mode, but Blizzard has been rolling out a monthly patch for it. And every patch Corey comes to with the absolute enthusiasm of someone who's ready to get going into a new season of exciting content, which Blizzard is not providing. Every time he comes on and talks about what's going on in Heroes of the Storm, he just brings the hype and the energy. And it's a little bit of copium there, I think, that he is trying to believe that this game will come back. I hope it does, but it seems like right now we just get a patch a month, and every time we bring Corey on, we get to have that excitement. I also really enjoyed the Lore Watch I was on about the Diablo 4 expansion, because
that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I came into that show with a very different opinion on the expansion than Matt and Joe had. And sometimes it's easy to start arguments or have these, just disagreements where you can't see the other side. But we had a really interesting discussion, because I did not enjoy the expansion that much. I thought the story kind of fell flat. It was a little weak. It did have one really amazing cinematic at the end, but I wanted a little more. And we had a great discussion about it. It's fun when you can come in and have really different opinions, but discuss them and really, really go through them, and everyone sees everyone else's side. was really good.
Yeah. I like those moments. Phil, you've joined us for a few. Do you have a podcast moment?
I don't know if I have one. I'm just always thrilled to be here. No, like I can't really pick out one favorite. I don't think, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to wind up doing it for today then, friends. I do want to thank you for sending in those questions. We have plenty more to go through, but we can always use more. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that is for and any special pronunciation for your name. You can also hit us up on Discord in our Q and Podcast Questions channel, or if you're a Patreon subscriber, our Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel. And as a reminder, Blizzard Watch is made possible due to your generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast or the queue, and an ads-free site experience. Friends, I hope the new year is treating you well, and we will see you next week.